Hi guys, Jenny with On Fire Fit, and welcome to another episode of Shoe Review, Hosiery Review, and of course a message. Today I am going to talk a little bit about what is wrong with the world and perhaps some solutions that will help. But first, let's look at the shoes. I will do a shoe review later, and then I have additional views for Patreon with all of my videos, of course. This pair of shoes does not have a name inside. It is a 6.5, or European is 36.5, and the box itself did not have a name on it as well. They are really pretty, patent, and I thought I'll bring you close as I put them on. I am also wearing some Geo full fashion stockings because I thought they went well with this outfit and the shoes. And of course the shoes could be worn without hosiery, but I was blessed with a lot of hosiery for review. So I am making use of them and enjoying them in day-to-day life. And these have a pretty little crisscross strap and a very different style than what I already have as far as the back especially. Well, actually the whole shoe, but the back is very kind of unique. So I'll stand up so you can see better. It's a pretty little back heel feature that I don't have in my other shoes. So I'll walk around with them and show you downstairs later, but first let's talk. This pair of shoes was sent for shoe review, but the person is also a friend of mine, and I had asked, what topic do you want me to talk about? And I don't always ask that question. Sometimes I have a natural idea of what I'm going to talk about, but I have my little list of topics, and I just wasn't feeling it with my topics, and I'd already done a bunch of the ones that I had really wanted to talk about. And he said, empathy. And I thought, empathy. And I almost asked in what way or what perspective. And I thought, have I talked about that before? And I thought, well, maybe I've talked about it before in different ways, but it's a great topic. And the longer that I let it kind of sink in, the more I thought, yeah, it really applies to a lot in life, personally as well as globally. And I was thinking about why, and first of all, like, you know, what is empathy? Well, empathy is the ability to understand or sense somebody else's feelings. You may or may not agree with their feelings, and that's okay. You don't have to agree. You just have to want and try to step into their shoes or to understand their feelings. And empathy is something I think that we are severely lacking because present world, we are very concerned with our own feelings. We are very concerned with what we think. There is a huge lack of trying to understand the other person, trying to feel what they feel, trying to relate to them on things that may be common between us. We are much quicker to look for division, look for differences, and we're seeing this split in all areas because of that. And I thought, what are the solutions to this? And how do you practice empathy? And kind of two things came to the front of my mind. And I'm sure there's probably more. And if you think of others, please put that in the comments. But there were two things that came to mind. And then I had two real life examples that I thought I would share with you. So the two things that I think are at least top of the list for empathy is perspective and humility. Perspective meaning identifying with that person and where they are in their stage of life, in their way of thinking, how they got to this point in their lives. Also, humility humility is the freedom from pride and arrogance. So by sheer nature of putting yourself in perspective of the other person, you start to humble yourself. You start to see things perhaps through their eyes. Also, with humility and perspective, I believe we have to pay attention to where we personally have come from and not lose sight of that. Because so often we'll get to a point in our lives where we feel like I have this better understanding, or I've grown, or I have more revelation of things, or I feel like I have more clarity, and we forget where we came from. We forget that we weren't always this way. We forget that, oh yeah, I used to think that way, or I used to live that way, and we forget that. And so then we kind of stand up on this platform pointing down at the people that we think don't have the clarity yet, and we forget to relate to them. We forget that perspective, and so pride and arrogance wells up, and then there's a lot of division again. I was thinking of a couple of examples, and you may not relate to this just depending on, who you are and what your life is like, but I thought of one perspective of parenting. So when my daughter was tiny, she's 19 right now, but when she was tiny, we took her to swim lessons. And when she was before and after the swim lesson, they were allowed to play, all the kids that were there for a lesson were allowed to play in the shallow end for, 10, 20 minutes before the lesson and after the lesson. And then, they would get scooped up by their teacher, take their lesson, and then they got to go play in the shallow end. There was always a lifeguard keeping an eye, and there was a line in the pool where they shouldn't go past that because it was going to get too deep and everything. And one of the very common problems that happened every time we were at the pool was parents are on the deck in street clothes, right? Coaxing, bribing, trying to get their kid out of the pool. Like, we got stuff to do, we need to leave, get out of the pool. But the child is down in the water knowing my mom's not going to jump in wearing all those clothes. And so they would duck under when mom would call them or dad. They would walk away in the pool, farther away from the parent. And the kid would not agree to get out. And inevitably, the lifeguard would have to get in the water, pick up the child, carry them out. All the while, the mom or dad has been either bribing or holding threats out for them. So at the very end of the lessons, there's a table where it was either red licorice or there was a bin of like animal crackers. And After a lesson, each child was allowed to either have, a little cup of animal crackers or one red licorice. The parents would always be threatening, you're not going to get your licorice, you're not going to get your animal crackers. If you don't get out right now, you're not going to, on and on. And lifeguard would drag that kid out of the pool, and guess what? They always got their licorice or animal crackers. And I would sit there and go, you are so enforcing the very behavior that you don't want. I had the same thing almost to a certain degree happen with my daughter. So she was little. Of course, she sees all the other little kids pulling this little stunt. And so she tried it. And I told her, you're not going to get a licorice. And she kept fighting me, didn't listen, didn't obey. And the lifeguard didn't have to pull her out, but she did finally get out of the water. And as we started to exit the pool, she went right up to the table where the licorice was. And I said, no, you didn't listen to mommy. No licorice. You would have thought that the world was coming to an end. And melting down, crying, and so upset, and I'll be better next time, and I promise, and da-da-da. And I said, nope, you didn't listen, and this is what happens. So out we went, that she was definitely affected by that. But guess what? Never again did I have to coax her out of the pool. From that moment on, anytime I told her, it's time to get out now. Okay, mommy. And she would get out of the pool. And she got her licorice, which, by the way, really cute. We used to always go to lunch with my mom after her swim lessons. And I told her she can't have her licorice before she eats her lunch. So she would hold that little piece of licorice in that little sweaty hand until after lunch. It was all gooey on her hand. She was so cute. And I would say, let's put it down. Here's a paper towel. No, I just want to hold it. I just want to hold it. That's what she would always say. And I thought it was adorable. But anyway, we never had to fight that battle again. But I was thinking about this with empathy and perspective and humility. And I thought, man, oh man, back in those days, did I ever judge all of those parents thinking they were being ridiculous? And I thought, you know what? There is a reason that the children are behaving the way they are and that the parents are reacting. There's multiple issues, but a lot of times parents have parent guilt. They feel like they're never doing enough for their kid, or they're working full time. And so the time that they are with the kid, they don't want their child to be crying and upset and melted down. They don't want to ruin, the emotional part of their day and stuff. Sometimes it's just parents don't know how to parent because we've gotten so far away from what parenting is all about. We're not there to be their friends. We're there to guide them on a good path that will lead them to a better life. And even in my example, my daughter was so happy. Kids don't want to be melting down. They don't want to be crying and all upset, and they don't want to be dragged out by the lifeguard. That one moment that we had that was difficult for her set the tone, but then it allowed her to live all of the future lessons in a very relaxed way. And there was no tension between us. And we had a lot of, I always gave her time to play and everything, but it just created for so much more peace. But I thought about this parenting issue and I thought, man, I used to come from a perspective that, why don't these parents get it? And I thought, you know what though? I have been in those shoes where I didn't want my kid to be emotional. I didn't want them to be upset. It was hard for me to make decisions that I knew was gonna, might upset them. And, in the back of your mind, you're always worried, am I going to set them up for anxiety and depression and, whatever, like we magnify these things. I had lost perspective on being a parent, and I was having some arrogance about my way was so good and whatnot. And maybe my way is more effective, but the arrogance of that attitude, even though I didn't express it to the parents, not like I would ever say that to people, but in my head, I was thinking that. And I thought, what if we had a gentler, empathetic understanding and say, wow, I feel so bad. This parent doesn't even realize that they're making their life more difficult. And the child doesn't know any better. Child is using manipulation, which everybody would if it's effective for them, right? And so a lot of times we just soften our attitude toward people when we remember where we came from, remember the perspective, try to feel what the other person is feeling, and stay humble and not be arrogant like we've figured it all out. And that scenario in and of itself kind of reminds me to be more gentle with people that maybe they just don't know, and they just haven't really had the opportunity to see good parenting or to realize that, wow, if I just stood my ground in this one moment, it would make my life so much easier down the road. Maybe they don't even know that. So, it kind of gave me a little more sense of peace toward other people instead of that riled up stuff. The other example I was going to talk about has to do with work. Now, in most professions, we have workers that are doing their job, and then we have leaders and or managers, if you want to call them. Not all managers are good leaders, but we have people that have been promoted, and now they are the ones kind of driving what's going on with the workers. And I was thinking about this because I've gone through personal stuff with that in my life, as well as friends of mine that have talked to me about their perspective on things. And I thought of an example from my own life in that I had a manager who was a wonderful leader. And I had a manager at one point that was struggling to be a good leader. And I thought, what is the difference? And it went back to perspective and humility. The one that was a very good leader had come from a position just like us, and she did not forget about that. She always held in her heart and her mind what it was like to be one of the workers. And because of that, when she led and helped implement things and made changes, she asked us for our perspective, our input. Well, you're the ones doing the work. What do you think would solve this problem? Because she asked for our input, we were more invested in the outcome. We had more of an interest in making things work versus a leader or manager who says, I need this many of this done now, and you must do it this way. And the workers are like, we already know that that doesn't work. We've been dealing with that all this time. And the manager doesn't want to hear it. And they've forgotten that the workers are the ones that know hands-on what's going on. Humility is also a big characteristic about this, because the leader that I had that was really effective was very humble, not arrogant, not full of pride, had a lot of ability to, at the same time as we knew she was the boss, she was willing to say, you know what, this might not work. What I thought was going to work doesn't look like it's working. Let's try a different route. Or just the sheer nature of asking the people under her for their perspective is a more humble attitude to have. The leaders or managers that I've had that were less effective tended to be the type that had completely lost perspective for what's going on in the day in and day out of the people that they're managing. And they tend to be very focused on their position, how they look, getting promoted themselves, and numbers, making sure the numbers, even if everybody under them feels squashed, not heard, and feel burned out. And a big part of burnout is when you feel like you don't have a purpose and you're not being heard. So if you have a leader who is willing to hear and is willing to implement some of the things that you might have in mind, those are leaders that are respected and people want to work harder for those good outcomes. We know that there's a lot of other things that get involved in this. So if, let's say, you are one of these leaders and managers and you are just like fit to be tied because you've got a bunch of lazy people that work for you, that is a problem. I think that there's a lot of things that have broken down in society that have contributed to that. I think that people don't feel invested in the work that they do. A lot of times people feel like they should be doing more important work than what they're doing, forgetting the fact that we all had to start ground level doing very menial work as we worked our way up. Unfortunately, we've become very entitled in this society to think that, right away I should be at the top and I'm not fulfilling any good purpose. By my first job, I had to put coaxial cables in little bags and run the little, what do you call that, little sealing machine over it. We all had to start with a job that might not feel super exciting, but it did fill a purpose. And if you're still in those kinds of jobs, you're filling a purpose. We've gotten to the point where we feel like if we're not doing some grand job that changes the world, that we shouldn't be bothered, and that we don't need to put in the work and that kind of thing. So there is a lot of issues with that. But again, I still think it's important for us to be empathetic. Even if you're a leader or a manager, what has contributed to this laziness? And what can we do that will start to make people feel like this is important? This is good for me to start at this level. And maybe a lot of it, we need to help people see that there are steps that they can take that will make them move forward if they're not happy in the position they're in. But it's going to require you do the work, just like everybody else. You start at the ground level and you work your way up. And it feels good to grow and move up. And sometimes it feels really good to get better at the low level and just keep doing what you need to do. Nothing says that we have to move up the ladder, and nothing says that we have to stay at the bottom. We have to realize that everybody has a different thing going on in their life, a different desire, different areas. Even for me, I could still be diversifying within my job, but I have chosen not to, because I am happy with growing my expertise in the area that I'm in. But my real passion is doing stuff with On Fire Fit. So I don't need my, my regular job to just keep going up, 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 up. I'm happy with where I am doing that work. And then I find my fulfillment over here. So just the same as anybody else. If there's a person that is working at a ground level job, but they find their enjoyment outside of work and they're fulfilled, that's wonderful. But we have to look at people's perspective from the perspective that we understand their feelings and be humble enough to get rid of our own pride and arrogance that we're always right, or that we've arrived at a higher level or something like that. I think that's a big issue in society in so many ways. My husband talks all the time about politics and how unless we can all start to have conversations, and he doesn't use this word, but I think be empathetic, doesn't mean you have to change your opinion, but you have to try to understand the other person's feelings. That is going to go a long way toward compromise and working together toward unity, which is what we all want, but we all seem to be going the opposite way. So I think that kind of idea of empathy is a huge topic. I could go in all different directions, but I thought that was really a great topic to consider for life in this world and personally, as well as when you look out at everything that's going on. There's a song that came to my mind, "Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me." And I grew up hearing that song and I thought, well, are we going to have peace on earth? Jesus said, we're going to have trouble in this world, but take heart, I have overcome the world. So, and we also are told in the Bible that as time goes by, there's going to be wars and rumors of wars and famine and all of this stuff. So we do realize that we are going to have a lot of trouble. But the part about that little song that I think applies here is letting it begin with me is critical. We're so quick to look and say, the world is all messed up. And then we just bicker, complain. Usually when people come at me with all the problems of the world and I feel kind of like, oh, I will always go, wait a second, what can I do in my life today that could help? If there's nothing that I can think of physically, I just pray. Obviously, I pray about it anyway, but sometimes all I can do is pray about it. But there are things that we can do, actions that we can take, and not just bickering and complaining, but it has to start with me. And that's the other part. It's very easy for us to say, well, all these people are not being empathetic. Where am I not being empathetic? Where am I still holding on to pride and arrogance in some area of my life? And let me look at that first before I start pointing my finger at everybody else. I think that would go a long way towards solving some problems, both in our personal life as well in the world. Jesus, you are amazing because you always give us beautiful insights into things going on in our personal life and our world. And I'm just grateful that you just continue to guide us in healthier directions and help us to exercise empathy, help us not to lose perspective, where we've come from, where other people might be in their lives. Help us to remain humble, to listen, to try to keep pride and arrogance out and highlight those areas where we are full of pride, and help us just to be more open to changing those things so that we can move towards unity and peace. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so let's go take a shoe review and a runway walk. Okay, so doing the shoe and hosiery review. I don't know how effective it is to do a shoe review when I don't know the brand name. I wonder if I can, I'll see if I can find it. Maybe online I'll be able to find it. But these are so cute with this little back. I don't know, it reminds me of like a cape or something. All right, so let's look at what we have for height of heel. These are 5 inches. And I'll get up so you can see a little bit better. I would probably primarily wear these with dresses. I think they're pretty, you know, classy and probably a little more dressy. You can chime in and tell me if you think they would go with jeans. I just think that the back would kind of interfere with pants. So probably gonna wear these mostly with dresses. I can wear these to work because they are closed-toed. And even my boss a long time ago, because I always wear heels to work, was like, he was the upper boss, but he said, oh yeah, those heels are great, you know, and I'm like, okay. Sometimes I wasn't sure if it was a good idea to wear heels to work, but yeah, very cute. I'll take these off so I can show you the hosiery. And the hosiery is from Geo. Okay, a little edit there. I had noticed that I lose hair like crazy. I always have, but one of my long blonde hairs had gotten down. So I'm like, I better get that out of there because that's like gonna show up. So I'm gonna take these off so you can see the hosiery better, but these are Geo stockings and they obviously are a nude color, 15 denier, and they have a Cuban heel. They're a size 9, full-fashioned hosiery. So they're made on the old-fashioned machines. You can tell with the needle marks on the back. And they have the contrasting foot as well as toe. And of course, these are more subtle because the back seam is also nude, but I do like, you know, kind of the more subtle at times. I think that looks really pretty. Okay, let's go for a runway walk.